It's geek time, guys. I'm Emma.
I'm Adriana. Yep. Got it right! Nice job!
I'll
Keep track of your points because you guys can do it. Would you like to explain this or
you go ahead.
Alright. So this week we are doing a Marvel timeline. Just because we were asked to do it. Because, some people were like a little confused or just
It is confusing. There's a lot.
There's a lot.
So we're going to explain the MCU. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay.
So the MCU is split into 3 phases, and then each one is technically supposed to end with like one of the group Avenger movies, but phase 2 got a little skiwampus, and there's one after it, but it's still considered phase 2.
Yeah.
So there's 3
weird.
phases. They each end in a group Marvel movie, an Avengers movie.
Okay.
So phase
we
1.
start off with phase 1. We start off with Iron Man. Right? I'm not.
Well,
crazy?
so
Well,
Captain America's first chronologically, Iron Man is first
Movie.
released. Anyway, so the first movie is Captain America chronologically.
yes. Sorry, I forgot we're doing timeline. Not release date.
So it goes
Captain America, First Avenger.
so during World War II. The very end of the movie, plane crash, he's frozen, then they find him, they unfreeze him, and he's walking around in 21st century New York.
It's a big change.
So, the very end of Captain America happens after Iron Man, just to be really confusing.
Yes. So we get Captain America, First Avenger, Iron Man, end of Captain America, First Avenger. A little weird. Stay with us. It's okay.
Our next movie that comes along in phase 3, chronologically, is after Captain America. It is Captain Marvel. This happens in the 90s. We get to see a young Nick Fury, a new Agent Coulson.
Well, yeah.
And we learn a whole lot more about our universe. And how the Avengers originated, how they were named, and very important points in the history of the Avengers.
Yeah, kind of plot holes just get filled up.
And then Captain Marvel is important because we get to learn her backstory, because at the end of Infinity War we see Nick Fury paging Captain Marvel for help.
And we see how that happened.
So we see her backstory, we see how she got her powers, and we also learn more about societies in the MCU. Like, the Kree have been taking over. They've been building an empire out of planets, and their major enemy is the Skrulls. So it adds more dimension to the universe as a whole, and it incorporates more planets and makes the universe seem larger.
Right.
So then our next one is Iron Man. And that movie explains how Tony Stark came to be Iron Man. So it is a very important
Origin story.
Yeah.
Kind of gets the beginning of you have Captain America's story, now you have Iron Man's, and so you get their stories before.
And then in between, so then after the first Iron Man is the unspeakable movie, The Incredible Hulk.
There's no Mark Ruffalo.
Edward Norton, I do not think he did a good job. I would not recommend watching that movie, and it is not necessary to the Marvel Cinematic Universe's plotline, so just ignore it.
Basic.
Alright.
After that comes Iron Man 2, correct? I'm not failing?
I think technically Iron Man 2 and the first Thor are kind of
they're on top of each other.
So
it's weird. So They like take place very close in time.
Yeah, I think even in part of Iron Man 2, they reference when Coulson is going to Arizona about
Yeah.
Thor.
So-
they do. I watched it.
So they're kind of intermeshed and like
They kind of go together, but they're totally different stories. So Iron Man 2 is more like, and just
life after becoming Iron Man.
exactly like his first like real villain. I mean, I guess
The terrorists, but
yeah.
it's the first villain of him being Iron Man.
Like his first like official like I am Iron Man. I'm gonna fight you as Iron Man instead of like a Tony Stark with like
Garage
new
parts.
exactly. So that's that. Thor is the first time we actually get introduced to the whole like Asgardian like multiverse. You're right.
Multiverse, yeah.
So like Asgard and Jotunheim and
The 9 realms, including Midgard. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because everybody's always like, well, how many different universes are there? And technically, Asgard and the 9 realms are not a separate universe.
they're
From
just
Earth, it's just a
Different,
different
like story.
Yeah.
Because like they're present, like Midgard Earth is a part of the 9 realms, but we don't focus on the 9 realms.
Yeah.
Because that's an Asgardian thing.
Because Asgard is the protector of the 9 realms, and so
So-
therefore they have their name for each of the 9 realms, but that is not necessarily the name that the realm has chosen for itself. For instance, Earth is known as Earth to people who live on Earth,
Like us.
but to the people of Asgard, it is known as Midgard.
And we're Midgardians.
Yes.
So-
So
Different.
it's not a different universe; it's just a different perspective.
Exactly. Great way to put it.
All right, and then the very final movie of Phase 1 is The Avengers. And this is when they all unite. Nick Fury puts into action the Avengers Initiative that has taken place in Captain Marvel.
So after that, and this is like the first time we see the team together, and that kind of brings us into Phase 2.
Yes. So Phase 2, the first movie is technically Dark World.
Yeah.
So the first movie is Dark World. This is where we see the Asgardian side of the repercussions of the Avengers. Because, as we all know, Loki was the villain in Avengers, but
Accepted Emma.
that aside,
This is
So-
also where we see the Aether for the
Yes.
first time.
so
Because
the
Captain America.
Tesseract and... Is it just the Tesseract?
Yeah, just the Tesseract.
So the Tesseract is introduced in Phase 1. That is the only Infinity Stone in Phase 1.
Yes. Phase 2, we get to see the Aether in Dark World. That's where its whole story comes in, how it's like the Dark Elves' power, and like it's their
A lot
huge
of
weapon.
people like to hate on Dark World. I do not think that is fair. I love Dark World. Not
Dark
as
World
much
is
as a lot of other
hilarious.
movies, but I love Dark
I
World.
love Dark World. It's
So
great. It's fun. So after Dark World,
is
we-
Iron Man 3.
exactly. So this is just another one of the Iron Man movies. Kind of continues on with
It's
his
also the
separate story.
repercussions of the first Avengers because he has a sort of PTSD anxiety from, carrying the missile up into the portal.
Yeah.
And so this is the repercussions of that. So he's having this sort of PTSD, anxiety, mental breakdown in which he is so heavily reliant on his suits to provide him comfort. So it's kind of his experience. So we have two experiences that are kind of after Avengers is the repercussions of it, and it kind of gives it a more realistic feel to not, oh, we saved the world, it's all over.
No, you're gonna have to deal with the after
Yeah.
things. So those are kind of like the whole right after Avengers in
Yeah.
Phase 1. Next, after Dark World and Iron Man 3, we have
Captain America, the
Great
Winter
movie.
Soldier.
that movie made me sad just because of Bucky. Anyways, good
So-
point to bring up. This is how we get Bucky back into the Marvel Universe because in the first Captain America,
He is
He was
supposed dead.
Exactly.
But
Now he's
looks like he's not.
Because he was frozen in time as well. Look at that. Best friends forever.
Literally.
So, exactly.
Maybe we'll have to get frozen in time.
Mm-hmm. That's not.
No, that would suck.
That's not. But this also shows us that Hydra, the main villain in Captain America: the First Avenger, came lasted
is
with Bucky.
still
Like-
is still present. It's not just gone forever.
No.
And it really shows how good and evil are not black and white.
They're meshed
very
in
meshed,
between.
and it's not always a straight line. The lines are very blurred when it comes to good and evil.
Right.
Especially because we know as the audience that Bucky is a very good person,
But
his mind is being
mind
manipulated to
controlled,
be evil.
He's been
And
brainwashed.
the same thing is when
So.
we figure out Hydra is infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. The Winter Soldier gives the MCU a little bit more dimension, because up till now it has been very black and white of good and evil. So Captain America takes the separation of these two away, and it makes the MCU more well-rounded and more dimensional.
And it also is now we're getting to the point where it's who do you trust?
Yeah. The
So-
next movie is Guardians of the Galaxy, which does not play a huge role in the MCU up until Infinity War.
Yeah.
So
So it's kind of its own thing, because you get kind of he lived in the U.S. and then he got dragged off to space, and it was his. Then it's his backstory and stuff, but we really don't see him come into play until Infinity
until
War.
Phase 3, when he comes through a little bit more, and all of the rest of the Guardians. The one important thing about Guardians of the Galaxy is it introduces Thanos
And the Power Stone.
and the Power Stone. So in Phase 2, so far we have the Power Stone and the Reality Stone, which is the Ether. So Guardians of the Galaxy is important to the MCU timeline for those two reasons. It introduces Thanos and it introduces the Power Stone. So our next movie is still kind of a little bit separate from the MCU.
Right.
So it is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Again, this plays a large role in the MCU later. We're introduced to... We learn a little bit more of the backstory of Gamora and Nebula.
And it also shows us how Nebula will play later.
Yeah,
now
because
she's more
we
into
now
Gamora,
understand more her
mindset.
and her reasons for hating Thanos so much.
Exactly.
And it gives them a very hard to dispute motivation for hating Thanos so much.
Yeah. So it's again still kind of its own movie, but they will come in to the rest of the MCU, but it's still trying to build the backstory of the characters. So, right. Next is Avengers.
Age of Ultron.
Yes. This is my favorite movie. But that's a whole separate thing. Anyways, this takes off, this is their next huge team mission. And they're in, is it Russia? Or am I failing?
They're in Sokovia.
Right.
Russia.
So this is where they get two more members of the team. The Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Obviously. Quicksilver isn't with us anymore. But it brings in Scarlet Witch, and she plays an important role in Phase 3. And and I guess in
It also introduces, technically the first Avengers introduced this Infinity Stone, but we were not aware that it is an Infinity Stone. In Phase 2, Age of Ultron, it is revealed that Loki's scepter is the Mind Stone.
Yes.
And here we also create Vision, who is I would say, pretty major player in Phase 3.
He's a major character. So this is where we get more of the major characters, and Phase 2 is where everything comes in, basically. You get
the bulk of information
Exactly.
that is required
you
to
get
move on to
Thanos,
Phase 3.
you get the two Power Stones, you get two more Avengers. This is where everything is starting to build.
Yeah.
So this is like the main plot, whereas
Phase 1 is backstory.
Exactly.
Phase 2 is information required
for Phase 3.
for Phase 3. So our last movie in Phase 2, which is the only one that kind of messes up the pattern of the phases, is Ant-Man.
Yes.
This is more of a comical movie than we have since seen in the MCU, save Guardians of the Galaxy.
Exactly, and it's also more of, again, his story. It's like Guardians of the Galaxy. It doesn't play a major role yet.
Yeah, but it will in the future. Alright, so moving on to Phase 3,
Yes.
the first movie that we see is Captain America Civil War.
This is where Ant-Man comes in, because this is basically Scarlet Witch kind of like makes a big mistake, and the government is like, okay, no more Avengers, no more powers, and all this stuff. So then,
It's all under government regulation.
yeah. So, and then the problem is you've got the rule followers, Tony Stark, who's just like,
Well, he's not traditionally a rule follower.
no, but in this case,
in
he's
his
like,
mind, he has seen all of the destruction wreaked on the world by these battles, and so
he's
he
like,
sees
yes,
it through the eyes
I'm
of
going to
the
follow
government.
this rule. And so then everyone on Tony's side is more siding with the government. They're like, you know what, they're right. We do make a mess and stuff. Everyone on Captain America's side is more like,
We need
Yes.
our free will to be able to properly defend Earth.
exactly. And we're defending Earth. Like, we're not, like, yes, there are things that happen, but we're still saving the world. So it splits the Avengers.
And
then,
I think it also makes the characters more dimensional too, because as we've established, Tony Stark is not the rule follower at all whatsoever, and Steve Rogers totally is.
so then this is where they kind of flip a little bit because of their personal beliefs. So,
Yeah,
And
and I
then-
think it really supports the characters' personalities more because it really shows how well they stick to their morals and they stay true to their character.
yes. So this is also where Ant-Man comes in and he fights on Captain America's
Yes.
side.
And that will be important further on in
And-
Phase 3.
In this movie, we also get introduced to the Black Panther and Spider-Man. So, big introduction of characters again. So, and this is also where Bucky starts to, again, come back to his old, like, self.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
So our next movie is Black Panther.
yes.
Another character building story. Black Panther was introduced to us in Civil War. The only backstory we got from him is he is from a country called Wakanda. His father is the king, and his father died at the signing of the Sokovia Accords. That's the only background we have on him up until this point. So now we have that more character building, and now since his father is dead, it is his turn to take the mantle as king of Wakanda.
And we also get another villain who ends up not being so bad, which happens a lot in the MCU. The villains...
They like to mess with that good versus evil dynamic.
Exactly. So, and we also get introduced to characters like Okoye and Shuri, who end up being super important in, like...
And they are also a very good representation of women in this movie. Because in Ragnarok, we see a little of that happen with a female villain, with Valkyrie, but it's still not the main focus. And so the MCU is bringing in more women into this picture, other than just Black Widow and Scarlet Witch.
Exactly. So, and then it's also his... we also see Bucky at the very end of this movie, and it's when he's basically gone to Wakanda to almost like therapy. Like,
Yeah, he's been like meditating, trying to clear this curse from his brain that has been inset by Hydra.
exactly. So, and that just plays an important role because now we know where he is for like the final.
Yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp also has some repercussions of Civil War, which makes it seem more realistic that there's repercussions.
Exactly.
And I think that's the most important part about Ant-Man and the Wasp, other than they reincorporate more the quantum realm,
Exactly.
which we're expecting to play a very large role
Exactly.
in Endgame.
And then Homecoming is kind of just Spider-Man's backstory, his whole thing, and then how like Tony Stark brings him into Civil War because he's like it's like right before Civil War when that takes place chronologically.
Actually, it's after. It's after Civil War because remember
Right,
he's
sorry.
back at his internship.
Exactly. But so it shows like just exactly like why he went into Civil War. That's what I meant to say.
So our next movie is Doctor Strange. This one again is kind of that backstory. We're introduced to the Time Stone. So we're kind of building up towards we now have
it's 5, I believe.
Yeah, we now have 5 Infinity Stones. Right?
Yeah, no, because we don't have the other one. Which I won't mention because it just makes things confusing.
No, because...
No, we have all of them.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So now we have 5 Infinity Stones. And Doctor Strange will be a major player later on in Phase 3.
So, after that, we have Thor Ragnarok, right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. She knows the timeline better than I do. So this is
very much comedic relief.
Yes. Which is needed because at this point, so many things have happened. So this is kind of
the MCU is becoming more dark.
Exactly. So this is kind of a needed like breath of fresh air. It's okay. So this is Thor, and also like how Loki becomes more of a team player. And also it shows us where Hulk has been. Because he wasn't present in Civil War, which was really confusing. Because, like,
Hulk and Thor were both absent in Civil War.
But we already knew that Thor was chasing after Infinity Stones. So we already knew.
And that idea is, once again, revisited at the very beginning of Ragnarok. He says, I was on a quest to find the Infinity Stones. Because he knows, from having spent time on Asgard, he knows about the Infinity Stones. He knows about their history and how much damage they can cause.
So now it just kind of shows us where Hulk has been, and it also creates the whole thing with Hela, which is important for Endgame, which we'll go into that later, because it's more...
Yeah. Alright, our next movie is Infinity War.
Oh, okay.
So, Infinity War is kind of the summation of all of the previous Marvel movies in existence. There is this one enemy, and he is more powerful than anything the Avengers have ever faced.
And he kind of brings, like, the whole thing together, because, like, you had them fighting as, like, the Avengers and stuff, but this brings not just them, but, like, basically their whole universes.
It even brings in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Exactly. Like,
it brings in the quantum realm. It brings in Doctor Strange.
It just
brings in all of the heroes.
It like unites everyone. I mean, obviously it's not a good reason. I mean, they're fighting Thanos, but it's just how we kind of get to. This is how Endgame is gonna, like. This is the reason Endgame can happen is because everyone's coming together at this point.
Yes, and Thanos has. I don't know if it's specifically his strategy, but it has worked out so that he has, yes, all of the Avengers are unified, but he has also managed to separate them so that they are not all together at full power against him.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, this is also where we get the 6th and final stone, the Soul Stone. So this stone has, like, 0 backstory, and, like, it's not introduced, like, anywhere. So it's kind of one of those confusing parts still. But it also shows us how Red Skull, like...
Yeah, it is a very major callback to the very first Captain America movie, the first movie in the entire timeline. And so it comes full circle with... It starts off with Red Skull trying to have the Tesseract, and now he is guarding the Soul Stone.
So, and after that
is Endgame. So this is the conclusion of Phase 3. It is going to bring the Avengers together. It will be the end of an era.
Yes, and we're talking about the original 6, because they won't really play a role after this. Because, like, we'll still have Spider-Man and Black Panther we may even still have the Guardians after. But this is like the end of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it is.
it's just
The
the conclusion
conclusion.
of the original MCU and everything that has been created with these first, like, 20 movies.
So after Endgame, some more upcoming movies.
Yeah.
Endgame, final summation. Then we have Far From Home, Spider-Man movie, more character development, probably setting up Phase 4. And then we have another Guardians of the Galaxy has been rumored to be released. There will probably also, it is rumored there will be another Black Panther.
Exactly. And I think that's the majority. There may be another Doctor Strange, but I seriously doubt it.
I think it depends on Endgame.
Exactly.
I think Endgame will determine what sequels are made just based on who
Yeah.
survived and how they can continue the character's storyline.
Yes, but that is the Marvel
That is the
timeline.
MCU.
So that was actually really fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
thought
that.
it was interesting. So, little recap, 3 phases. Each phase generally has one major coming together movie towards the end that kind of concludes the phase before we move on, introducing more characters, more Infinity Stones, until Endgame is the final conclusion of it all. And phase 4 will probably consist mostly of the new generation of Avengers coming to fill the original 6, their positions in the MCU.
Yes. And that's everything. So, as always, please fill out the feedback form because we love your
Feedback.
Your feedback. I'm struggling today. And then please subscribe if you're not. Click the bell icon so you're notified when we post new videos. And please comment because we love like interacting with you guys and seeing you guys interact because it just makes us happy.
Yeah.
And so that's everything.
Yep. Okay.
Geek out, guys.
I'm Emma.
Yep. Right. Nice job.
I'll keep track of your points because you guys can do it.